Welcome to Transform Now, brought to you by SSNC, where we explore the future of work through the lens of AI. Across industries, leaders are rethinking strategy, culture, and operations to harness AI's full potential. This podcast gives you the insights and ideas to transform your organization, stay competitive, and thrive in a world driven by change. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is the weekly Pulse Check, where we take a look at what's going on in the world around automation and AI. We've picked the best headlines, or at least the ones that pique our interest, and we talk them up. And let's get into it. Michael, we've got 6 articles to cover today. Number 1 is from USA Today. It's titled, Elon Musk Loses Lawsuit Against OpenAI. So, Michael, you've got a $1 billion grudge match. You've got a unanimous jury verdict. You have a lot of deliberation. You have a man who wants $134 billion. He wants his rival fired. All that stuff combined. The drama is so thick you can cut it with a knife. And yet he walks away with nothing. So I know you're feeling a ton of sympathy.
I am.
So why don't you tell us all about it?
So yeah, if you haven't been following the saga, which most people haven't, but if you haven't been following the saga, Elon Musk, who helped found OpenAI back in the day in 2015 or whatever it was, to be this capability for all of humankind to have a nonprofit that's working on safe AI. He was a part of the board for quite a while. Then he dropped off the board, and the year they left the board, that's when they set up OpenAI for a for-profit business. And the legal mechanisms behind that are a bit complex in terms of how it's actually structured, and I'm not going to get into those. But the idea behind is that Elon Musk wanted this to be a charitable, nonprofit organization to be kind of doing altruistic work for the good of mankind. And now seeing Sam Altman, spearheading this towards a profit-based thing, gave him some pause. Not that he's against profit, because as you know, he has many companies that are for-profit and are doing quite well, including SpaceX, which I guess had its IPO or is having its IPO this week. So we definitely will see that. Now that's not an issue here. What is the issue was the fact that it started off one thing and then it changed to something else. And while Elon did lose the argument here, the challenge was not because of the merits of the argument. It was because of the statute of limitations. And with that statute of limitations, even the judge said, your appeal doesn't hold much water either, considering that's the reason why the jury found against you in this lawsuit. So, again, they didn't really have to go into the facts as much as they did the timing for the way this came about. And unfortunately, the way this worked, it did not work out for the favor of Elon Musk in this case.
Right. Yeah, the jury certainly did not like the fact that Musk was well aware of OpenAI's direction as far back as 2021, but he didn't file this suit until 2024, well after he had formed xAI, which competes against OpenAI. So it really did not work in his favor.
Right.
In fact, OpenAI's lawyer called it, quote, a hypocritical attempt to sabotage a competitor. That's a nice way to put it. Imagine if it had happened. I mean, this would have been really incredible. Altman getting fired, OpenAI paying way too much money to Elon. It would have changed the whole landscape of AI. But as you said, it didn't have really a good chance anyway. Just something that rich people do. They sue each other. Nothing ever happens. So, all right. Well,
it made headlines though. That brought both of them to the forefront yet again.
Yeah. So let's move on. Article number 2 is from Business Insider. It's titled 81% of enterprise technology leaders report production failures from AI generated code. Well, this may be the first time that the enterprise technology community is saying we have a serious production problem from AI code generation, at least at scale. So what was your take on this article, Michael?
Well, they interviewed 200 technology leaders and really asked them about how they're using code in production. And what they're saying is that 67% of these leaders report a significant increase in the code volume over the past year, and 52% higher development output. So that's pretty significant. They're developing more code for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge they had is that as they did this, there's all kinds of costs that got attached to these, significant increases in code development. And because of that, there's some gaps, let's put it that way, in terms of the way they, the validation of that code, because there's so much code coming out itself. It's very difficult for actual engineers to review that code to make sure that it is sufficient, even though it appears to be sufficient. That quality assurance component, generally speaking, tends to be lagging behind because of the time it takes to do quality assurance. It's one thing to write a test case. It's another thing to test against it with production data and all the other things. So between that and the whole security aspect, there's a lot of testing that has to go on before something goes into production. And what they're seeing is that they've moved things into production after it's passed some parts of these. And I don't know, they didn't really go into what parts it's failing on. But they are saying that after it's been moved to production, they've had to adjust it because of the AI generated code itself. So that leads me to believe that the code itself may be doing something significant and it may be doing something well, but the individual cases that are being sent through it from a QA perspective might have been caught earlier, or they could have been caught before it was put into production, to be sure that they didn't have these kind of issues once it made it to production. So it's difficult when you have the floodgates open and everyone's developing, vibe coding, this, that, and the other thing. It's very difficult to go through the same types of rigor that you would have with a traditional software development, even if it's going through Agile where they're doing them on an iterative cycle. The fact is they still have the same disciplines behind it to ensure that quality assurance is applied before they progress the code.
Yeah. Token anxiety is definitely having an impact. Companies trying to rein in the cost, and the costs are even harder to predict because they scale with usage intensity, not just with user count. And so that's causing all kinds of governance challenges, and companies really trying to rein that in. The most startling thing from the survey they did was 0% of the engineering leaders they surveyed said that they were very confident in the AI generated code, that it will behave correctly as deployed. That's shocking. And they gave some examples in this article, that one from Amazon about some pretty significant outages they had because of bad AI generated code. So this is a article to pay attention to and make sure that your company's not going too far down that path without putting the right controls and quality checks on it.
Absolutely. Move fast and break things, but don't break too many things, right?
No. Okay, so article number 3 is from PwC. We actually had a PwC piece last week as well. So they're saying a lot these days.
They are.
This one says, it's titled 3/4 of AI's economic gains are being captured by just 20% of companies. with the leading companies focused on growth, not just productivity. So they, in this article, they spend a lot of time talking about who's really making the most strides in the AI value game. And their thesis is it's a very small percentage and they have a very specific playbook. So tell us about it, Michael.
So I couldn't help but look at this as the Pareto principle, where we have 80-20. It ends up being 74% 20. The idea is that 20% of these organizations are deriving the most benefit from it, and it wasn't on cost reduction. And that's the challenge that I think the market is seeing right now, where they're saying, well, this is fantastic. We can get rid of people. We can do this thing with less people. We can do, get rid of, save. And the problem is you can't save your way into growth. So the companies that are doing it well, the ones that are getting the most benefit, are really focused on that growth factor. And that helps them to expand into different industries, or expand the way they're in their current industry. And that's probably the biggest issue, is seeing things in a different way than your traditional go-to-market. And because of that, you're reinventing how you're approaching the market, leveraging AI as an accelerator, as a catalyst to be able to do that, rather than simply saying, how can I, reduce my operating costs with this new technology? So I think where we're also going to see this is not in one specific industry, but across industries, because the mindset applies no matter what industry you're in. So this isn't just well, I can do this in financial services, but I can't do it in ag tech or something like that. Yeah. The reality is that you can, but you have to get out of pilot mode. And everyone tends to get stuck in that pilot mode because they start working through things and they find out there's more to it, and some things that they potentially can't vibe code their way out of. And that ends up being an issue. It's not bad that they're starting these pilots, but they have to learn how to kill them quickly or to move on quickly, sort of like the startups do, where they write things and move on. They pivot quickly, and those type of things are not necessarily all that well ingrained in larger organizations when they start moving into that kind of AI platform.
Yeah, and as the title of the article implied, they also pinpointed that growth opportunities, that's where they're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Yep. They also talk about, if you're reworking the entire workflow versus just a portion, again, that's a winning combination.
That makes sense, because we talk about this internally inside of SS&C as we're rebuilding our stuff. You can't do things the same way when you're leveraging this technology that really upends how you think about resourcing for a workflow. And so by leveraging that right resource, whether it's a person, a digital worker, RPA bot, a script, whatever it is, or an API call, or an AI agent, the reality is that those resources, as they come to bear, should be applied where they make the most sense, and not just overlaid on top of an existing process.
Right. And one other thing they mentioned that I found interesting was that collaborating with partners outside of your core sector is another big factor influencing your returns from AI. And that seems to really deviate from the original, build it yourself. Everyone just needs to, isolate, build it themselves, and stay within their own organization versus, having an ecosystem around them. So, interesting observation for sure. Okay, article number 4. This is from MarketWatch. It's titled "Lower Value Human Capital," quote unquote, is what a bank CEO calls thousands of workers he's cutting because of AI. So this is the most provocative article of the day. A major global bank CEO on an earnings call describes thousands of his own employees who are being replaced by AI as replacing lower value human capital with financial and investment capital. So, Michael, what's your thought on this? Is this a PR blunder, or is it just how executives think about
I think he may,
workforce
I
right
think
now?
he may have said the quiet part out loud. But honestly, it was very tone deaf in terms of the way he delivered this and how they're planning on cutting roughly about 15% of their workforce in some of their operational functions that tended to hit in areas like India, Malaysia, Poland, and China, where he was considering those to be lower value workers. And that to me is probably the biggest issue of all. Maybe the work they're doing is not considered to be as valuable as some other work is, but calling the workers themselves low value, I thought was extremely tone deaf, especially in this age of AI where people are already concerned about how AI may be affecting their own role. But to add this to the mix, extremely tone deaf, in my opinion, to be able to say this in such a public format and mean it. I mean, it didn't just slip out of his tongue. This is something he meant as he was describing the reasoning behind why he was moving forward with this decision. So, not the best look for your organization for sure.
Yeah, and clearly, some CEOs, maybe like this one, they think of reframing headcount as more of like a capital allocation move, and so that in doing so they tend to use language that it very quickly becomes a bit provocative and
Well, it's certainly
insulting.
detached. I mean, we've seen this before. There was a time where the CEO of McDonald's was taking a bite of their new burger and he called it a product. This is a really good product.
Yeah.
And instead of calling it a really good burger, it's this food that we're eating, but he called it a product. And that kind of ties into what you're saying, that is in the C-suite, when you're looking at this from a very high level and trying to move the chess pieces around on the board, oftentimes you have resources that are faceless and nameless, and objects that are to be controlled or managed within your organization. And it really detaches that personal connection, because each one of those objects, those resources, is a human being, likely with a family, certainly with bills, that you're making these decisions about. Obviously, sometimes you have to make hard decisions when it comes to that. You're the CEO, you are in charge of this. Your shareholders are looking forward, the value that you're going to be bringing to the organization. But again, going to market in a public way to talk about your own people this way really devalues how they are seen in your eyes and may tip the hand to how you may be perceived within that organization as simply someone who's moving chess pieces around and doesn't really care about anybody but himself.
Yeah. You got to be so careful today in the way you talk about these sensitive areas, and especially displacement of humans, and
Absolutely.
when AI's in the picture, or even if it's not, you still have to be sensitive. So, all right, let's move on. Article number 5. This is from Artificial Intelligence News. It's titled, Bain sees US $100 billion SaaS market in agentic AI automation. So Bain and Company has done their market sizing, and it really validates everything that we've been seeing, talking about, and even preaching on this show for years. But they also added some nuance to it that I think kind of reframes things. So I want to know what you thought about the report and some of the numbers and the percentages they talk about, because there's one in particular that blew me away, and we can talk about that in a minute. But what are your thoughts?
Sure. So, they went through the concepts of the percentages of, organizations who are using this, the vendors that are capturing markets, etc. And according to them, I assume this is the number you're talking about, that 90% of this capability remains untapped
There you go.
which is pretty substantial, meaning that the industry's only made a 10% impact at this point in terms of how they're moving forward. But, going through some of the discussions they talked about, they talk about the various components that could be automated. We've seen this from McKinsey reports throughout the time in terms of the number of workers that roles that could be automated by 2030. That was a report that came out several years ago now, even though 2030 seems like it's pretty darn close these days. But they reiterated again some percentages based on the types of roles that might be automated. But they also identified some factors that determine how much of a workflow can realistically be handled by an AI agent. And this, I think, is important because there are quite a lot of folks out there who are under the assumption that if I bring an AI agent in or multiple AI agents, not only can I get rid of all my, quote, lower value humans, like the bank CEO was saying, because now I can do this all with AI, but I actually don't need humans in many of these roles.
Right.
When in fact, that's not quite the case. So they said there's lots of examples regarding getting verifications and whatnot, but they pinpointed some regarding regulatory or financial risk that require a lot more human supervision, even where the agents themselves may be technically capable of doing this. And this comes to the discussion point that I've often brought up, and that's the idea of velocity versus accountability. The agents themselves may be able to do this very quickly. They may even be capable of doing these things, but somebody needs to be personally and professionally accountable for the outcomes at each one of those steps. So those are going to require people whose jobs are on the line to ensure that, yes, this reporting that I'm sending for tax filing is actually accurate and I stand behind it as a person. I can't have the AI agent say, well, the agent did, I'm not accountable. It's definitely has to come down to a person. So there will be people that will be continually attached to all the outcomes for their accountability. And they call that out here pretty quickly.
Yeah. And so they say 100 billion for the US. If you add countries outside of the US, that's market could be as big as 200 billion.
Right.
And again, only a small percentage has been tapped. So that's making companies like ours very happy when we look at the market potential. Bain also identified that the highest value areas are those that are not controlled by like a single system of record. So this is about workflows that span ERP and CRM and other systems and APIs and what have you. And so they're talking about the value of orchestration and how that is going to play a very significant role in what companies do in the coming years. So good article, certainly aligned to our direction and our thinking and
absolutely
our product that we've rolled out. So I thought it was very, very interesting.
Spot on.
All right, so we move to Article 6. And this was the fun article
Yes.
of the list. So this is from the Guardian, and it's titled Pope Leo to issue text on human dignity and AI with Anthropic co-founder. So this has a lot of levels to it, right? Theological, geopolitical, corporate, ethical. You could covers the gamut. So the Pope is publishing his first major teaching document, which is the word for it is encyclical.
Encyclical, yeah.
Which is I had to look it up because I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but it's a papal letter that gets sent out to all the bishops of the Catholic Church. And so he is publishing this one alongside the co-founder of Anthropic, who is a bit of a lightning bolt in the US, at least, because the presidential administration kind of gave them the boot because they wanted to use their AI in a certain way, and Anthropic said no. And so now the Pope is coming in alongside Anthropic and authoring this paper. What are the implications of, well, first of all, talk about what you think the paper is,
Well,
purpose of it is, and what are the implications of it?
and the whole purpose behind it, as they mentioned, is the protection of the human person in the age of AI. And that's a challenge because if you look back to the article we covered with and we'll bring back that poor CEO, he's seen lower value human capital. And that's sort of what this paper, I think, is going to address, is the fact that that people are still humans. They're still even if they're a resource in your organization, they're still a person. And to understand how to treat people with dignity, even though we are so used to now chatting with AI in a way where we can be direct, blunt. We could assault our AI with words because we're unhappy with the way it does, and it doesn't respond in a way the person does.
Right.
So that the emotional aspect of how we're communicating, especially with a non-human entity like a AI, is starting to get reflected in the way we're talking with others and reviewing others, reflecting on others. So removing the empathy from the organizational implications. And I think that's probably where the biggest issue is. The second one is the idea they talked about here, not only the workers and their workers' rights and the fact that people are being affected the way they are, but also with AI in warfare. Again, because it's very different for a person to pull a trigger against another person in a place where two people have been sent to war, likely not wanting to be there, yet they're on the side to be confronted with those kinds of decisions, versus an AI who doesn't necessarily have, it doesn't have any remorse, and it has no feelings about what it's doing. It has an objective, and that objective can be carried out without any empathy. So going forward, those are the biggest challenges I see that the Pope is trying to address as part of this. Obviously, I appreciate his viewpoints. I'm not sure how well that's going to sink in with anybody except for the bishops at this point, because I think there needs to be some more of a sea change that is coming with the global leadership to see people in a different sense versus just see them as resources.
It should be noted that Pope Leo signed this on the 135th anniversary of another paper that was authored by the original Pope Leo, Leo 13th. Now we have Pope Leo the 14th, I believe. And it was signed in 1891 on around the time of the Industrial Revolution, basically. And so people are saying he's doing this. It's really the moral equivalent of the Industrial Revolution. And so the church has a long tradition of intervening in labor and capital kind of debates. And so this is yet the latest example of it. It just happens to deal with AI. So the timing of it is interesting. It's also interesting that it was another Pope Leo who wrote that original paper back.
And what was unfortunate to me was that the picture they used was not an AI generated picture of the Pope in a white puffer jacket, like the last Pope was done, that one that had gone viral. So
right. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today's Pulse Check. Remember, every week we publish another episode on our podcast that has a really good and interesting guest. So be sure and check that out. Otherwise, we will see you back here on the Pulse Check next week. Same place, same time. Thank you for being here, and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.